Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I am Amanda Muldoon. I am a member of the Policy Circle's Indiana State Leadership Council, and we're very happy that you could join us for today's program about women's role in public policy. As you know, women make up about 51% of the population, but we continue to be underrepresented at all levels of government. Today, specifically, we're going to focus our attention on public board and commission appointments and really learn how to engage and take action on the state level. Having diverse voices at the table, it just leads to a broader range of effectiveness, and gender equity in public service really benefits everyone because it improves decision-making overall. In fact, research shows that increasing gender diversity boosts efficiency, increases public trust in government, and improves quality of life of impacted communities. And although we're focused today at the state level, keep in mind a lot of these same tips that we're talking about are going to come in handy for local and county level appointments as well. You know, each board and commission is unique in its purpose and mission and role. And it's important to check with your own city, county, and state government websites to become familiar with the different types of boards and commissions in your region and really find those that align with your unique skills and passions. So what can we do to get more women appointed? Well, you're already taking action by joining us today as we share some of the best practices to increase gender diversity on boards and commissions and build a network of women qualified to serve. We're going to hear from Michael Nossett, Deputy General Counsel to Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb. We'll also hear from Indiana Senator Erin Houchin and Indiana Representative Robin Shackleford about the importance of public service and how we can take action through public policy. So keep your eyes on the chat for directions or links to additional information discussed in today's programs, and use the Q&A for questions. We'll be answering them throughout the presentation, and then there'll also be an open forum at the end of the program to address any additional questions in the Q&A. So now I'm going to turn it over to State Leadership Council Chairperson, Katie Glick, who's going to introduce our first panelist of the day. Katie, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Welcome again. We appreciate you joining us on this gloomy, kind of rainy Monday. We hope it kind of lifts your spirits this afternoon. So I'm going to dive right in and introduce our first speaker, Michael Nossett. Michael's Deputy General Counsel for Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb. He was born and raised in Central Indiana, and he's passionate about all things Hoosier. He's a student of history. He's a proud alumnus of two Indiana schools, Wabash College and the IU Maurer School of Law. In his role with the governor, Michael provides legal advice and counsel. He oversees the governor's awards and recognitions programs, and he coordinates the governor's appointments to the state's 200 plus boards and commissions. So that's what he'll be talking to us about today. Before joining the Holcomb administration in February 2017, Michael served as Deputy Attorney General with the Office of the Indiana Attorney General, and he and his wife Grace and their beagle Otis live in Brownsburg, Indiana. So Michael, I'm going to give it over to you for remarks, and then I'll ask you a few questions, and we'll open it up to the floor for questions as well. If you do have a question, please pop that in the chat, and we'll try to facilitate those as time allows. So Michael.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Katie, and thank you to the Policy Circle for having me today. It's boards and commissions can put people to sleep, so I promise I'll be as lively and engaging as possible. But thanks for letting me be able to share a few minutes of what I get to do on a daily basis for Governor Holcomb. It really is a privilege. I really want to echo what Amanda said to start us off. What I'm saying today will be about my day job as far as the state's boards and commissions, but really the initiative of just being in organizations like the Policy Circle, asking these questions. That's a great starting point. You're already on the track to increasing involvement and to helping us as we try to get more Hoosiers, men, women, from across all different corners of the state involved in serving, not just at the state level, but also at the local level as well. So a little bit, Katie touched on my background. I get to do a lot of fun things for the governor. I'm a lawyer by trade, so I get to work on some legal matters for him. But my day job is really focused on helping the governor through the much bigger process than I anticipated of going through this. There are over 230 different boards and commissions, and that's not counting the new ones that most recent legislative session. So quite a few boards and commissions that touch, if you think about it, they touch really every aspect of daily life as Hoosiers, whether it's economic development to universities to my personal favorite, the state egg board, which regulates if it's a jumbo or a medium-sized egg and what the temperature should be in the refrigerators at the supermarket. So kind of just by way of introducing the board system, if you will, I said there's about 230 different boards. That represents about 1,500 gubernatorial appointments. There are legislators involved with some of these as well. I know Senator Houchin is on some of these, as well as Representative Shackleford has a legislative presence on these as well. But those appointments aside, the governor selects about 1,500 people over the course of 4 years to serve on boards and commissions. So we, first and foremost, I hope it surprises you how many opportunities there are. And secondly, I hope there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. Kind of what the role of those is to, some of them are more advisory. They'll help comment on policy of different state agencies. Some are localized and only deal with issues on a couple, 3-county basis. Others govern an entire program for the state, statewide. So think of your university boards of trustees. Indiana University, for example, is governed by President McRobbie, and then our new incoming president starting July 1st. But the actual governing board of the university are made up of appointees by, many of whom are appointed by the governor. And so those folks are the ones who set the policies and make the big decisions for the universities. So ranging from advising and commenting on how programs are being implemented to really diving into local issues to making the big picture decisions for economic development or for universities. That's kind of the broad charge that's given to boards and commissions. What encourages me the most about this whole system, I can tell you it's a busy job for me, recruiting and trying to make sure we've got folks in the right places. But what's the most encouraging to me is just how broad the system really is in terms of without folks willing, just everyday Hoosiers willing to step into leadership roles and help govern or at the very least advise on particular programs, we wouldn't have a lot of input. We wouldn't have really a lot of touch with communities who are being impacted by the particular areas of focus of these boards. My joke always is that we'd have to hire a lot more bureaucrats to manage things and not really know what they're doing, maybe, as well as folks who come from these particular communities or from these particular backgrounds who can lend us their expertise. So all of that to say, there's lots of ways to get involved. There's lots of commitment levels. There are some boards that meet every month for folks who've got that availability. Katie Glick is on one of those for us. There are boards that meet once a year that only have a role to play as things arise. So there are kind of different schedules. There are different topics, as you might imagine. I mentioned a few of my favorites, but kind of the biggest one of me that I would kind of make the plug for today is in the professional licensing world. If you have a CPA certificate, or you are a physician or a nurse or a surveyor, there are about 37 different types of licensing boards over the professional licensing agency that serve as the ultimate authority, if you will, for that particular profession. So if you're a nurse, the nursing board is the one who sets the rules on what you get to do on a daily basis. They get to, when someone runs afoul of those rules, they are the ones who discipline the individual's license and put them on the straight and narrow. They also are at the beginning of the process and help them join the profession and work through the licensure process. So if you have a professional certificate, then that's an area we are often looking for a lot of folks to serve and be part of the governing body of their profession. I want to share with you a little bit too about the governor's vision for boards and commissions. As I mentioned, it's a great way to get involved, and historically, because some of the boards have taken more time, they've been kind of either a monthly or every other month sort of basis. It's been a lot of folks from Indianapolis historically, and I'm from the west side of Indy myself, so no disparaging, but at the same time, the governor, if you've ever met him or if you've heard him talk, he will talk often about his passion for the whole state of Indiana. He wants state leadership, and you see it in our agency heads. He wants state boards and commissions even to reflect the the state of Indiana. And that's from diversity of all types, whether it's gender diversity, ethnic diversity, racial diversity, or from all different corners of Indiana. We really want to try to make this system of governance as representative of Indiana as we possibly can. So that's why, again, I'm really excited to be with you today and happy to answer questions later on. Got just a couple more things I'll touch on, Katie, and then we can move into some questions. But just kind of overall, to give you another little more into the weeds of appointments. There are about 200 to 300 positions. Sometimes on the off years, there's a 450 sort of year. That'll be this year. It'll be a busy year for me. But between 200 to 450, 100 appointments come up for review each year. Many of those folks are serving well. They and want to continue on, will be reappointed. But there's at least a position on most boards, most every board that comes up each year. And so if there's a particular area of interest or somewhere that you'd like to serve, odds are every year there's going to be a position that would at least come up for consideration. So lots of turnover in the appointment world. And as I mentioned too, there's a lot of ways to get involved. If you are serving on a local board, for instance, and you want to get involved kind of at the state level in the same issue, that we certainly have opportunities for that. If you're totally new to public service and just want to find a way to give back in some way, there are opportunities to do that as well through serving on state boards and commissions. Maybe you've got the time to meet once a year, or you want to kind of learn the process of how a public service on a state board would work. We've got kind of, I call them starter level boards as well. So just kind of a broad overview of the system. Again, I'm thrilled to be able to talk with you today and answer any questions that I can. Because really the governor wants to have as many folks involved from all different corners of the state. In particular, Katie and I had a conversation a couple of years ago. I'll share with you that governor really would love to see more women in particular serving on boards and commissions. Again, it's been a lot of, because of the time commitment, it's been a lot of retirees. It's been a lot of folks from Indianapolis. And again, no disparaging that, but finding folks, in particular, finding more women who would be interested in serving, finding folks from all different corners of the state is really a passion of ours. So thrilled to get to talk with you today. And Katie, happy to answer any questions as we go forward with the rest of our time.
Thanks, Michael. I talk about our conversation and meeting with the governor and a few others often because he really does want to reflect the boards and commissions to reflect the population in the state. And that would mean over half of the appointments should be for women. And, we as women are pulled in 1,000 different directions, but I really like the boards serving on boards and commissions when you think about public policy or public service, because a lot of people think about public service and I have to run for office, and that's not the case. You can work on anything from campaigns to being involved in the legislature and helping, your elected officials form public policy, right? Or you can serve in another capacity. And I don't think just being involved over the years that many people know about all the different types of boards and commissions. And we are at the end of the session going to share the link that you can go and look at and share your interest in doing that. And then we also want to let everyone know that we at the Policy Circle are also a resource as well to help you, to introduce you to that, or to help you navigate what you might be interested in doing too. So a few questions. Are these positions paid or are they volunteer?
For the most part, they're volunteer. There are a small handful of boards that are full-time, and so they are paid on a full-time basis. Generally speaking, though, there's only a couple, 3 of those. Generally speaking, they are you get a per diem like jury duty. So depending on the workload of the board, depends on how much how much convincing I have to do to beg and plead with you to serve. But no, generally speaking. I'd say kind of the average schedule is boards meet on a quarterly basis, and we give you your jury duty pay for serving, and we greatly appreciate that.
Yeah, and speaking from personal experience, I sit on a larger commission, right? And we get a very small per diem, but that's fine. I wasn't even expecting to even get that. I saw it as my broader sense of public duty, right, to serve on that. And so I think you'll get that from most people, and it's not, the money isn't that important. What's the difference between a board and a commission?
Sure. Really, substantively, not much. And it just depends on what the legislation that most of these are created by law. Some of them the governor creates through executive order, but generally speaking, they're created by law. And so sometimes they're called boards, commissions, councils, committees, task forces. I'm sure there's another word too that I'm blanking on, but really substantively, there's not much difference. If it's called a task force, and as Katie mentioned at the end, we'll be sharing the link to our website. This is just a little handout of all of the boards and commissions that are kind of organized by subject matter that they reference. Most of these have websites too, and if they don't, then please feel free to reach out to the folks at the Policy Circle or to me, and we can get you some more information on some of these particular boards. But no particular difference unless it's maybe called a task force, in which case it's going to be more limited in duration. And for instance, there's a task force on, I believe, stormwater, which is important. Doesn't sound as exhilarating as, say, IU Board of Trustees, but there's a task force on stormwater and kind of drainage systems and looking at Indiana's infrastructure that's been created that's going to go forward for this next year or two. And those are more limited in duration for experts in the field to come in and tell us, hey, here's a snapshot of a particular infrastructure project or a kind of a study. It's basically a long study committee to give some information to our office and to the General Assembly on here's a new direction maybe we need to go in the law.
I really appreciate the way that these boards and commissions are formed sometimes too, because they're under statute, right? It's like you have to be a plumber to sit on the plumbing board, right? Or a nurse, but then they also have spots for your average citizen. So like I'm just an average citizen representing the state, my fellow Hoosiers on a board. And so I think the way that they're written, it's a good balance of citizens versus experts versus other professionals that touch that field, whether it's a CPA or whatever. So I really like that. Are these meetings usually in Indianapolis or are they regional? I mean, does it depend on the board and commission or how does that work?
It really depends on the board, but generally speaking, they meet here in Indianapolis. And then the nice thing is one of the benefits of COVID is that we've kind of learned how to use this technology, and still with its glitches from time to time, but the General Assembly has adopted some changes to the meeting laws that allow you to be able to have these meetings virtually in many cases, at least when there's a public health emergency and those sorts of things. And there's some flexibility too, as far as having to come in person. Most boards have a policy where you can meet three times a year remotely and not have to attend. But to your point, Katie, also there are some regional boards. The Northwest Indiana RDA or the NICTE board that govern kind of the economic development opportunities, and then the South Shoreline and those sorts of things that are more regionally focused up in Northwest Indiana. Those will meet up in their particular area of jurisdiction, but for the most part here in Indianapolis.
Right. So I live in the state and the governor is of the opposite political party. How does that work? Does he have to always appoint a Republican or Republican or a Democrat, depending, or how does that work with the different boards and commissions?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, as far as kind of diversity, the governor wants the boards to reflect the population of Indiana, and that includes Republicans and Democrats. In some cases, there are particular boards where the law says you've got to have no more Republicans than Democrats, or no more of one party than another. My favorite is the plumbing board, says that you can have no more than 3 plumbers of the same political faith, whatever that means. That said, there are some boards that are really key. You think about the board that helps the Secretary of State govern our elections. Given that the Republicans and Democrats make up the majority of Hoosiers, the Libertarians certainly as well, and other parties, but Republicans and Democrats are really the main 2 parties. There's statutory requirements that say 2 folks on the board have to be Republicans and 2 have to be Democrats. So even by law, we're required to have folks from all different political parties, and we actively solicit and are looking for folks who are across the aisle from us all the time to serve in those capacities. And then, frankly, we're looking for the experts in your field, or somebody who's passionate. As Katie mentioned a couple minutes ago, there are some positions that it's specific requirements. If we need an egg scientist, apologies, Katie probably knows what that's called, and I don't. But we need somebody who has an expertise in poultry on the egg board, or we need someone who's got a particular advanced degree in stormwater management for the stormwater task force. But generally speaking, I'd say the majority of appointments are just everyday Hoosiers who are either passionate about a subject or they're willing to give up their time to learn about a subject and come in and be on the governing body for that particular issue. And so whether you're a Democrat plumber or a Republican plumber, there are not just statutory requirements, but there's also just we want boards and commissions and the state's leadership to reflect what the state actually looks like.
Great. And I'm going to wrap up with one question. And if anybody else has any questions as we go throughout, drop those in the chat and we can facilitate those at the end of the program. But so how can we help you as the policy circle? I mean, sometimes you call me and say, I need a farmer from this district who's interested in soil and water conservation. Like that's just, so how do we become a resource and how do we kind of help you break down barriers, whether that's getting names, getting people to be just educated and engaged? Like how can we help you as an organization, and then even the women who are interested in watching today?
Absolutely. Really just kind of by starting out, just having these conversations. I'll tell you, when I came on board, I knew of about 30 boards and commissions that governed nursing or medical licensure, those sorts of things. Had no idea quite the extent of influence that just ordinary Hoosiers can have in terms of governing a whole area of the state, a whole topic of the state, if you will. So just having these conversations and helping folks know. Kudos to all of you involved in the policy circle for wanting to be more involved and looking for those opportunities. Just helping folks know that to even ask those questions and have these conversations and look for opportunities. They're there, and we're actively looking for folks and just helping our office be able to match up interests and have these conversations with folks. It really goes a long way. Secondly, what I found helpful with various groups around the state is just to have a database of folks who've said, I'm interested in serving. Here's kind of the ballpark of time frame that I'd be able to give. And just having that resume on file. I've got a drawer full of resumes here in my desk that some folks gave them to me 4 years ago, and a particular opportunity never arose until today. And we've been able to plug them in to the place of their interest. Other folks, as Katie said, I'll call her up with a 911. I need a farmer, and we're able to find somebody who fits the statutory requirements and get them started pretty soon. And so just kind of having a database of folks who are interested, of particular areas of interest, and what sort of time commitment they'd be able to give, whether it's a couple times a year or every month sort of thing. Just having those, knowing that there are folks out there who are willing to serve is great. So two things, a long way of saying two things. First and foremost, just have conversations with folks of, this is a way to serve. There are more ways than just running for office, which is a huge time commitment, as I'm sure our speakers later will share. And it's a great way to give back, but there's also a way for kind of on a smaller scale to still have a grand impact, but not have to go through quite the same political process. So, right. And then secondly, just to have those have folks who are interested, just send us your resume, and we'd be happy to consider you.
Great. And again, we're going to share the link later, kind of in our call to action to the website about boards and commissions. You can read up on what's all out there and you can submit your resume and learn more about it. And then second, we're going to drop a poll in the chat about where your interests lie. So I tried to look at the long list and break it down. And so there were too many, but here are a few for you to kind of think about, so we can plug that in. And again, we'll be happy to be a resource and help connect you as well. And I'm happy to personally talk about my experience too. So we're going to move on to the next part of our program. I'm going to introduce my fellow council member, Lauren Hall, and she'll introduce our next speakers.
Thanks so much, Katie. We are thrilled to have Senator Houchin and Representative Shackleford. I'm going to give a brief introduction, And I am then going to toss it over to my colleague, Colleen, to carry forward the conversation. So Senator Houchin serves Crawford, Orange, Harrison, Perry, and Washington counties, as well as Eastern Du Bois County. She is on the Commerce and Technology, Elections, Family and Children's Services, Homeland Security and Transportation, Utilities, Veteran Affairs, and the Military Committee, so quite busy. She was appointed to the Indiana Commission for Women, and in 2017 earned the Legislative Excellence Award from the Indiana Prosecuting Attorneys Council. Representative Shackleford serves the Indiana House District 98. She is the ranking minority member for public health. She is on the Courts and Criminal Code Committee, Financial Institutions and Insurance Committee. She is the chair of the Indiana Black Legislative Caucus, vice president of the Indiana Power Caucus, and in 2018 was a Woman in Government honoree by the Governing Institute. So we're just so thrilled that these servant leaders have joined us today, and I'd love to have Senator Houchin share a little bit more about how you would introduce yourself and tell us your why and how for seeking public service.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate the Policy Circle and the generation of information it provides for policymakers. I am honored to serve here today and speak with my colleague in the House, Representative Shackleford. And so a little bit about me. I grew up in Southern Indiana, Scott County. So, when I served on the Women's Commission, I was one of those geographic diversity people. And that was a great experience. So anytime, I just want to reiterate the participation in those boards and commissions. That's a great way to get involved and not be elected to office. But for me, when I was a senior at IU, I interned in the state Senate, and that gave me that's what I always say is I got bitten by the bug to serve at that point. The internship ended, and I called the State House every Friday for 6 straight weeks in both the House and the Senate, asking if anybody had an opportunity for me to work there. I got hired as a legislative assistant in the House of Representatives. I worked for Brian Bosma, Benita Becker, Dean Young, Ralph Foley. And that's really what set me off on this process of public service. Having said that, my path to where I am today was not at all linear. It wasn't like I decided as an intern that this was my future and that's where I was going to end up. After working at the State House, I worked in accounting, I worked in marketing, social work. I got my real estate license, finally worked for DCS, got married. My husband was an intern the same year that I was. And so we got married and started a family. But over time, I continued my involvement in the political party locally, and I tried to do everything I could to build skills and gain leadership experience. So I did campaign training from Farm Bureau. I did the Women's Campaign School at Yale University, the Indiana Leadership Forum, the Lugar Series. And then finally, I went back to school to get my master's in political management from the George Washington University. It was during this time I was a stay-at-home mom. I had left DCS and I was at home with my kids. I had 3, and my son was 2, I think, just about 2, when I got a call from Dan Coates wanting to know if I'd be interested in working as the regional director in Indiana. Funny thing about that is when I was in the master's program, they told me 90% of the people in this program will get a job offer before they graduate. And I was in year 1, and I thought, I'm in Salem, Indiana. I am not getting a job offer in the field, but I appreciate this education. And I got this call. And so after working for him, that's when I really was serving my constituency in the district that I represent now, and decided that it might be a good idea to try to seek office so that I could be of more help to my community. And that's when I ran for office in 2014 in the current Senate district that I'm in now. But my husband and I, we live in Salem with our 3 kids. Claire is 17. She's going to go into secondary education. Elaine is 15. She's interested in the FBI. And my son Graham is 12, and he'll either go into stand-up comedy or he will be a musician or a gamer. I'm not sure yet where that will end up, but honored to serve and happy to be here with you all today. But that's sort of my path and trajectory of getting to where I'm at today.
Great, thank you. Representative Shackleford, would love to hear your journey to where you are and your why for your work.
Well, thank you. Thank you everyone for inviting us. I am happy to be here. Senator Houchin, it was exciting to hear how you got here. So I didn't know about some of those things. So I think my road is probably similar to Senator Houchin's. It wasn't a direct shoot, kind of just indirectly, but still having that focus that I wanted to create change in my community. So it all started like when I was in high school, and I could see the difference from going to a traditional public school to going to a suburban public school, and just the lack of resources and a disparity between both. And also in healthcare, my mother was a single mom for a long time. So a lot of times we're on Medicaid or we were without insurance. So seeing the difference from being with insurance and without insurance and how you treat it. So I knew I wanted to make some kind of change in the community. But when I went to IU, I was straight business focused. I was going to be a business major. But by my third year, my junior year, I was like, this is not for me. I don't care about making money that much that it has to be on my mind 24/7. I'm not going to be able to make a change like I want to. So my counselor recommended that I try a public affairs class. I fell in love with it. I thought, why run a company when I could run the whole state, or I could run a city and be more impactful? So that is what really got me engaged. And then I had to make a decision if I wanted to do education policy or healthcare policy. And at that time, I was leaning more towards healthcare policy because I firmly believed you always needed your health. And the healthcare industry was more changing, more challenging to try to be in and get people help. So it started from there. I got a BA in public affairs at IU. Within 2 years, I was like, okay, I need to actually get some experience because I didn't know anyone that worked in the public sector. I didn't have any connections at the state or the city or anything like that. So I decided to apply for an internship with the House of Representatives. I did not get it. I was an alternative. So being an alternate, they sent my resume down to the clerk of the Supreme Court because they wanted some of those good people that they didn't pick. And John Okeson, that clerk, which was a Republican, ended up hiring me to work in his office. So I was there for a year. It was great experience. But while I was there, I was also in graduate school getting my master's in public policy. And we had to do an internship. So I went ahead and went to the Democrat Party and said, look, I will do anything. This is free labor. This is when I can come in the evenings. And one day I may want to be a legislator. So at that time, they put me with then Dan Parker, who was over the state rep races. And I learned a great deal of how the party treats our elected officials, people trying to be elected officials. So it was good to be able to see that behind the scenes and from the party standpoint. So I was still wanting to get into the House. A slot opened up for a legislative assistant. That's when I met Representative Crawford, the former or then Cherish Pryor. We became great friends. And so I ended up getting a position in the House as a legislative assistant. From there, I just worked in government. I did lobbying, worked at the Department of Commerce, continued to work in government with the city until our mayor, Bart Peterson, we did not get reelected. So I was unemployed for about a year during 2008. I went back and did some lobbying / internship for Ice Miller. And then that's when I went into the private sector after that year into project management and was a project manager for probably about the last 15 years. So I was able to balance being in the private sector and still doing governmental work. And then that's when I ran for office while I was in there. Representative Crawford was about to retire. He wanted me to take his seat. So we just started the process of being able to get elected and take his seat. So it is an honor to have taken his seat. It's an honor to have him as my mentor and help me get through all that. So I'm trying to do the same, make sure I'm mentoring not only other women, but also anyone who's interested in running and just trying to encourage them and let them know that they can do it. But that's pretty much the why, and that's the how.
Phenomenal. Thank you both so much. Your passion is so clear. You're leveraging your experiences, your values, not only being mentored, but also thinking about your own children and other folks, other public servants who come after you. So really inspiring, and exactly the tone we want to set with Policy Circle. So I will now turn it to my council colleague, Colleen, who will continue this great conversation. Colleen.
Wow, thank you both so much for sharing your journey. I think women sometimes we think it has to be like X to Y to Z, and that's how we get to where we want to go. But to hear that we have two really exemplary women in public service who didn't just followed passions and this is where you landed is just, I think, a great benefit to this conversation. You both are so great at championing both your constituents, and I know you both serve on some traditionally women issues and are great at championing those too in the male-dominated Indiana General Assembly. So thank you both for your leadership. Seeing you in public service is just so important to encouraging and creating that pipeline of women who will step up and serve behind you or with you. So on that note, Representative Shackleford, we'll start with you. What does public service mean to you now? And what are some lessons you've learned in your experience serving?
So I would say public service definitely means helping your community, being a public servant. Indeed, because the main thing is being able to be there to help, also to connect your community and people to resources. We have a lot of resources at the state, whether it's funding or just human resources that people need assistance with. So being that connector and then being able to implement and make laws that's actually going to affect change in your community. So making sure that any laws out there is good public policy. I hate to see bad public policy, which is one reason why I got the master's in public policy, but making sure that at all times you're serving your constituents and serving your community.
Thank you. Senator Houchin, what does it mean to you? And maybe has it changed over the years? And what are some lessons you've learned?
Sure, thank you. And I had no idea, Representative Shackleford, that our paths they're pretty similar. So it was interesting to hear your story as well. Thanks for sharing that. So for me, public service is certainly helping people, helping my state, helping my community. And I think, I got into it knowing that we would be able to make policy changes, and that was important to me. But there's also the constituent side of things. And during the pandemic, we helped hundreds upon hundreds of people access unemployment benefits. And being able to be in a position to actually do something to be helpful in the pandemic was meaningful to me in terms of public service. But for me, I look for system gaps. And that's something that I think surprised me in my role, that, we do have an ability to impact our own districts, but we also can impact, the entire state within our service. And so, my son has dyslexia, and we didn't know anything at all about the issue of dyslexia when we started this journey on trying to help other students. And when we started to understand that kids with dyslexia cannot learn to read except for a certain methodology, that the information has to be presented to them in a certain way, and the sooner you catch dyslexia, then the better the outcomes are for students. I got very passionate about trying to fix this big system gap in the Department of Education. So system gaps is certainly that. And we did a dyslexia screener for kids in grades K-2. Now every school corporation has a reading specialist trained in dyslexia that can serve as a mentor coach to teachers that get these students in their classrooms. And then the last budget cycle, I got funding for the dyslexia screeners to be paid for. And so, I continue on that path, but even outside of public service, I serve on a local board, it's called CAST, and it's affiliated with our local church, and they provide dyslexia tutoring for free for students in our community. We've raised $100,000 to train teachers in these methodologies. And so that's been very satisfying to me to work at both from the state level and then, at the granular level in my own community. But it certainly it means helping people and making positive changes.
I agree with both of your definitions. I think helping is just the core, and when people get involved in public service for the helping reason is when I think we see the most success. So this session was not only a budget session, but it was a budget session in a pandemic. So I'm sure it was quite challenging for everyone involved. Could you maybe talk about 2 to 3 bills that either you were excited or proud to author or co-sponsor? Because I know you are in different houses, so bills switch and they need a co-sponsor. Senator Houchin, why don't you go first?
Sure. I had a couple of bills that I worked on, and one that's very important in my district is access to broadband. Senate District 47 is among the most unserved areas of the state for access to broadband, and we know it has implications in telehealth. Education, certainly during the pandemic, was a huge highlight because kids were on e-learning and they needed access to the internet. In agriculture, in entrepreneurship, business development, it runs the gamut. And if we don't have access in our rural areas, then it's beautiful. We love to live here because of the beauty and the space and the outdoor recreational opportunities in Southern Indiana. But we want to be able to also compete in a global economy, and we can't do that without access to the internet. So since I got elected in 2014, every single year I've worked on legislation to move the ball down the field in terms of broadband access. My language was the first broadband grant program, which turned into the Next Level Connections program. And so I had a couple of broadband bills I worked on this session, one with Andy Zay and one was my own. I worked with Representative Soliday and Manning over in the House. And really we're trying to fine tune the resources. So we've got federal dollars coming in and we want to make sure that's going to areas that are unserved, not overbuilding in areas that already have access and continuing to leave people behind. But then, we want to make sure that our state dollars are spent in an intelligent way also. And so that's the idea of the program. And I always excited to work on that and try to get further access. The other issue that I worked on that I'm particularly passionate about is DCS oversight, the Department of Child Services. I worked in DCS for about 3 years. So that's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. You may have seen recently in the news, there was a family of 5. It was foster children that died in a house fire that were in foster care. They were in relative care at the time. There have been several high profile cases that we see in the news. And these child fatalities have become a particular passion of mine in trying to prevent that from happening by gaining access to information that we as policymakers can use to make good decisions in training, in rule changes, in legislative changes that keep kids safe. And one of the things that we ran into, and I have been running into for the last few years, is that as legislators, we can't have access to information because it's confidential. The department might say, we can't tell you anything about this particular case because it's a matter of confidentiality. So I'm trying to find a way in which, and I created this oversight committee or interim study committee on child services so that we can look at how we can have access to the information we need to make good decisions on behalf of these children that are in the state's care and try to avoid these tragic outcomes. Because the only way right now that we know that stuff is happening is if the media reports on it. And that's not an effective way forward for us to make good decisions. And so I've been particularly passionate about that issue and trying to get a good resolution. One last thing is the task force on standards and accommodations. Again, going back to the issue of education, kids in Indiana were denied text-to-speech accommodations and certain accommodations for math when they took the state iLearn. They were disallowed it even if they were blind, that you couldn't have text-to-speech if you were blind and couldn't read Braille. On the iLearn, when you took it, you could not have access to that accommodation. If you were dyslexic and needed it, you couldn't have it. So I passed a bill which created a task force. We had some lay members on that task force, another opportunity to serve. And we ultimately got to the point where now, if you have an accommodation on your IEP or 504, you are allowed to have it on your standardized tests.
Great, thank you for your service. Representative Shackleford, are there 2 to 3 issues that you were really excited to leap into or proud to author or co-sponsor this session?
So most definitely, and we forgot to answer your lessons learned, and I think one of the big ones is compromise and collaboration. And this was one of those sessions that we did a lot of compromising, but it came out with success and definitely collaborating on both sides of the aisle. One bill that I was happy to co-author was House Bill 1007. That is going to put $50 million to help with disparities in health, to help with tobacco, infant and maternal mortality. So these grants will be out there for nonprofits to apply. We have been at the bottom of a list of a lot of lists when it comes to healthcare in Indiana. So to be able to put $50 million to help cover some of those areas where we've been deficient is just awesome. The other one, looking at the budget also, I was able to get $600K for a grocery store here on the east side of Indianapolis. Those of you may know I've been fighting for food deserts for years and trying to get a healthy food financing initiative, money to put in our communities for healthy foods. So this will actually be a grocery store that is started by a corporation, but then is handed over to 2 African-American gentlemen to own and run here in our community. So we are excited about that. House Bill 1006, I think that everyone has heard about by now, our law enforcement bill. That was one of our biggest pieces of compromising and collaboration legislation, where we wanted to make sure that our law enforcement was accountable, but also help them out. So this bill, you'll see in our de-escalation training, officer may be decertified if he does misconduct. We defined chokeholds and raised it up a level so it is only used as a deadly force. An officer may be penalized if he turns off his body camera. He can get up to a misdemeanor. And then lastly, just trying to keep them officers from going from one department to another. Now their HR record will follow them to that next department. So we're able to see that whole transparency of their background. And we also gave immunity to the other agency to make sure they're okay with releasing that information. So that was a huge monumental bill here in Indiana. And in addition to that, we put $70 million into our training facility. So the training facility will be rehabbed, redone. And right now we're trying to work on make sure that we get enough minority and women-owned and veteran-owned businesses, pieces of those contracts that will go to rehab that facility. And then lastly, this is one that you won't see my name on, but my language is in there, House Bill 1199, driving privileges. It was a governor's initiative trying to help people with suspended licenses. Representative McNamara authored this legislation. They allowed me to put my traffic amnesty renewal language in there. So if you remember, I had a traffic amnesty program that passed last year that if you had a suspended license, you would get 50% off your reinstatement fees and also your court fines. So it expired in January of 2021. So now in this bill, we will extend it another year and a half where people will have access to that. And then also the governor's portion, if you've been working, I believe for about 3 years successfully, you can also get some of those reinstatement fees taken off your record. So that is another great one. Those are just a few. There was a lot this session, but I won't go on and on, but those are some of the highlights.
No, I mean, thank you both for your work. It was a really critical session, I think, not only from a budget perspective, but also, the pandemic highlights the broadband gaps, the health disparity gaps in our communities. And I think that was really important in your work. I mean, I was tracking, so it was just amazing to see the work that you guys could do through collaboration and compromise. So my final question is, do you too, from, you're serving in this male-dominated lawmaking body, do you think that the lack of women lawmakers is a critical weak link in the Indiana legislative body? Or do you have any words or, tips that you would want to share for women who are looking to really get engaged in the type of public service that is serving in the Indiana legislature? Senator Houchin, you can go first.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a strange place. I've worked in a lot of different fields, and I never felt disadvantaged necessarily because of my gender in those other roles. I mean, when I worked in DCS, it was female dominated. But working in accounting and marketing, it's a mix. But I have to say that it felt like stepping back in time when I came to the General Assembly. It's just I do think it's critical for more women to be involved and to run for office. We see the world a little bit differently, and I think it helps. We're certainly not reflective of the overall population of the state. So I absolutely think it's critical for more women to be involved and to have that perspective shared. We see, feel, and experience things just a little bit differently, no matter if we're from a different part of the state, but also just in our life experience. So I certainly would love to see more women colleagues with me in the State House.
So, and I agree. Women definitely, they make decisions differently. They usually take in consideration the whole family when it comes to dealing with anything. They take in consideration the community. They do it in a thoughtful and passionate process. We are more process focused. We follow up, we talk to people. So sometimes when you're working with men, you have to push them a little bit to communicate. Women are natural communicators. We're going to be texting each other, calling each other, going out to lunch. We'll talk anytime, any day. So with men, you just kind of like have to ease your way in there and send them a little text. It may take them a while to get back to you. But I remember I posted on LinkedIn, now all the Disney parks are ran by women. Dick's is now ran by women. So someone said, well, what's the difference? Well, the women will look at the family. So everything, whether if it's the faucet in the restroom, how many stalls is in the restroom, to how much food, what kind of food, we are the main shoppers. We're going to take in consideration everything. At Dick's, they said now we want women to feel more comfortable coming in the store, bringing their kids in the store. So you'll see all women are usually the ones buying the stuff for the kids, buying their equipment for sports. So it will be more women friendly as you're going in there. The legislature is the same way. The way it's constructed, the way the seats are, it's all male focused. Nothing, I think, had women in mind when they structured the State House, how we're putting these policies in. So if women came in, we could see more of a push to say, okay, let's make this more friendly to not only women, but people with disabilities, people of different cultures. We seem to have that more holistic approach. And for any woman who's considering running for office, I just want to say you can do it. You can work and take care of the kids and be a legislator. Now, you may not be able to do everything at the same time, depending on what level your kids are and how much need they need, especially when it comes to making sure they're doing their homework, feeding them, and having a husband. That can be very challenging, but we are here to help in any way, any capacity. If you need us to come and step in and babysit while you're out canvassing, we can do that. We can help you canvass, because we definitely want to see more women in there, and any support that you need, whether it's fundraising or knocking on those doors or writing letters, we're here to help you. So definitely don't be afraid. If it's anything that you're considering, then do it.
If I could just interject and add to that. First, I think that's absolutely right. We tend to be more collaborative. And, one of the things that people don't probably see from the outside looking into the General Assembly is that the amount of bipartisanship that we do have. We had about 94%, I think 92% of the bills that we passed were bipartisan in the Senate. Unanimous support is a little bit more elusive, but we do tend to work together and find that compromise and be collaborative. And I think that certainly is a factor of our female perspective coming to that from our point of view. But also, about serving at any, I've got 3 kids. When I started, they were much younger, and I drive 2 hours, an hour and 45 minutes. Most days I drive back and forth so that I'm at home for the swim meets and I'm there in the evening. And I always say there's not anything more important going on in Indianapolis in the evening that's more important than what's going on at home. So I drive an hour and 45 minutes, 3 to 4 days a week. And somehow managed to get that done. I have a lot of time working on my phone, hands-free. but it can be done, and it's difficult, but a lot of parents make greater sacrifices than I'm making to do this service. So.
Well, thank you both. I mean, I agree. It's women, we do see the world a little different, and I think our communities are better when we use our voices to do that. I'm going to actually toss it over to Jamie Locke, another council member of the Policy Circle here in Indiana, and she's going to answer some or talk about maybe some audience Q&A. So Jamie.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all three of our panelists today. This has been a great discussion and just listening. And, you know, the one question that I do see that we have not answered yet is really quickly, what is one message or advice you'd give to youth today, specifically to girls and women, on getting involved and why it's important? And we'll actually start with Michael, since we haven't heard from him in a little bit, and then throw it to the others.
Sure. Well, definitely Senator Houchin and Representative Shackleford can answer this better than I can, but really just looking for opportunities and knowing that they're available, that we really do value having women having a seat at the table and having these conversations and leading. You look at the governor's cabinet of how many, Dr. Box, Dr. Sullivan, that are running these kind of key agencies in response to the pandemic. They're women, and they're knocking it out of the park. And so having women and having girls see such just stellar representatives and senators like we've got on this call today, and seeing women in leadership, I think is huge. And so being a part of that, just by asking questions of how can I get involved and having the determination to get involved, I think goes a long way. So whether it's, again, I'll make my plug again for serving on a board. If there's a way that we can help you learn how to serve and kind of grow your experience, we'd be happy to do that for you. But we just encourage you to ask those questions and be part of things like the Policy Circle to get involved.
That's great. Thank you. Representative Houchin.
Oh, sure. I think there are unlimited ways for young people to get involved right in the community. My daughter volunteered for a local domestic violence shelter, putting together care packages. So it doesn't matter. Find out what you're interested in and seek those opportunities out, which are right in your own backyard. That is a great way to get engaged in public.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Shackleford.
Yeah, I also agree with everything that's been said. I will say definitely find you a mentor. If you want to be a legislator, then reach out to one of the state reps or the senators. Everyone is eager to mentee young people and show them what we do behind the scenes. If you're a woman and you want to get in this field, contact one of the legislators, the women legislators, and ask them, can I follow you for a day? Can I see what a day in your life looks like? We are more than happy to have you come with us, especially during session or whether we're at community meetings, so you can see what it's like in and out of session. But we're always there to help in any kind of way and being the mentors. And then also Girls Inc. is a great program. If you have a Girls Inc. in your community for young women, to get them involved in these nonprofits that really empower them and give them that opportunity and chance and encouragement to be involved in community service. I think those are great organizations and great way for young girls to get involved.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much. I am going to throw it back to Katie for some last comments, but I appreciate all of your time today.
Thanks, Jamie. And again, thank you to our speakers. I know you guys are busy doing all of your public service and public duties, so really appreciate you. And thank you to everyone that joined us today. So we'll be sending out a follow-up email that includes some links and some highlights and all of that. But in the chat real quick, we're going to drop the links, and we want to leave you with 2 takeaways. We want you to learn more about the Policy Circle, obviously. So we'll do that. And then we want to encourage you to get involved. Again, I love that get involved in your own backyard. I think that Senator Houchin said, or in your organization, community organizations, right? So that's kind of where it all starts. You know, if locals for you, great. If you're state, great. If you're federal, great, right? So find what suits you, and if you don't know, try them all out. And we're here to help educate you and connect you, and we want to be a part of your public policy and public service journey. So check those links in the chat, and we'll be sending a follow-up email. And again, thank you to everyone for joining us on this Monday. Really appreciate it.